Hey, this is John, head nerd at PlayoffComputer, with an unpolished walkthrough of the new iOS version of the PlayoffComputer app. Certainly, depending on when you are watching this, some of the details or even presentation may have changed, particularly some of the things currently not in the iOS version as compared to the Android version may indeed be available by the time one sees this as work continues. And for demonstrating, I'm using a 13-inch iPad. There may be some display differences depending on screen size, and if an iPhone is used, also orientation of the device. Starting out from the home page, just two options: import and get premium. Most of the features that will be discussed here require a yearly subscription for about the price of a beer, but it is recommended to make sure the basic functionality is in working order for your particular league's setup before upgrading. Anyway, we'll click Import to proceed. Currently, most of the popular fantasy hosting sites are incorporated: ESPN, Sleeper, Fantrax, MyFantasy, Flea Flicker, and NFL. The two that are missing as compared to the Android version are Yahoo and Fantasy Premier League. Yahoo is the difficult one of the major fantasy football ones. The format output of their data feed is from the Stone Age and different than the output from anywhere else. Also, they are the only site that requires authorization to access any league data. So that requires some additional beer-fueled brain power to work up enough energy to tackle. And Fantasy Premier League, obviously soccer to Americans. Being soccer is a points-based league, as in standings are sorted by league points, not wins and losses. And that is a complete different animal to provide calculations for. Actually, I'm not entirely sure of the interest from the FPL crowd. I don't get any data from the existing Android version telling me how much use the FPL capabilities there are used. So I definitely would welcome some feedback from anyone in internet land that would like to see FPL capabilities being added here before I spend precious time on that issue. And before I forget, there also is a capability here to use a companion Google Sheets template to keep track of the league for any league not covered by the hosting sites discussed, regardless of sport. And the app can then import the data from that spreadsheet template. Full instructions are on the website for that. Back to the demonstration. Depending on the hosting site, there will be various things that need to be input or adjusted before being able to get the league data. Some, like the ESPN here, the sport of the league has to be selected, as well as the league year. Some, like MyFantasy, the current week as well as the last week of the regular season have to be adjusted, things like that. But of course, they all require a league ID. I have a sample ID mostly for my purposes to test things. I'll plug that into a Flea Flicker league. And depending on the hosting site, the import process can take anywhere from a few seconds to a minute or two. Comes down to how many times the app has to ring the API to get all the data it needs. Once the league shows up, at the top will be some basic information, namely what the app got from the data, like how many divisions there are, number of wildcards, and tiebreakers. Again, depending on hosting site, The app may or may not have been able to get every bit of detail needed, so just peruse that quickly to make sure all is correct. Next, we have several sections of data and options to go through. First, the team info. This shows the current standings and related data, such as points scored, division record, if applicable, conference record, if applicable, and so on. The division status, if there is one, as well as the playoff status will start out blank, as there hasn't yet been any analysis. We'll revisit that part later on. Within the team info section is an option to edit the info. This serves a few purposes, at least as far as I can see. First, there is one site in which all the necessary data to do any calculations isn't contained in their API data feed, that is Fantrax. So this would allow one to enter any missing data, such as points scored. This also would allow for accommodating leagues that maybe manually sort the standings based on different rules than are supported through the hosting site by putting in data that doesn't automatically appear. Another purpose that may be helpful is to edit the sometimes long-winded and creative fantasy team names to something either shorter or more owner descriptive, which can make the paths to clinch report, later discussed, much more readable. I've switched over to a test league to continue on, as all the hosting site sample IDs are either football or baseball, in which it is currently in the off season for both. The next section is the remaining games one. This will list upcoming games, and for funsies, for premium users, lets us do unlimited what-ifs to our heart's content. We can see what the playoff picture would look like under various scenarios by pre-selecting winners. Besides just seeing how things look if our team was to win and such, it also allows, at least for fantasy football, to look at an updated picture when maybe some of the weekly contests are already decided after the Sunday games, but before Monday Night Football. I'll undo the pre-selections for this demonstration. Next is the past game section. Right now is just informative. FYI, for this test league, there are no scores that were put in. Next is the analysis settings, which is going to tell the app how to do calculations. Depending on hosting site, some things may or may not already be set up correctly. Others are optional. First, we have a consider tie games question. Unless tie games are a real common thing in a league, it is recommended to leave this off at least up until the last week of the season. If you pay attention to the NFL playoff race and know the difference between the clinching scenarios and simplified clinching scenarios that the NFL and others put out, you'll know what I mean when I say that for the paths to clinch listings, things can get almost indecipherable if the possibility of tie games is included. For multi-division leagues, as long as the division winners are automatically given a playoff berth, this should be left on. If the league does something different and division winners don't automatically make the playoffs, turn this off, and then manually adjust the next part, which is number of wildcard spots. For non-division leagues, this will be the total number of playoff spots. For multi-division leagues, this will be the number of wildcard spots excluding the division winners. And side note, a pro tip, you can use this not only to determine the playoff picture, but for things like maybe the top 2 spots that might get a bye, or for leagues that dole out a last place punishment. know who is already safe from that fate. For the points buffer, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. There is way too much info on the website about this. But for leagues that use points as a tiebreaker, this is what will be calculated as how many points one team could gain or lose against another team for the rest of the season. A rough guide is to take the difference between a good and bad score and multiply that by the number of weeks left. An example would be, for most fantasy football leagues, say about 150 is a good score and 75 is a bad score. The difference of those is 75. So if there were 2 weeks left in the season, a fairly realistic number to put here would be 150. This can be adjusted as desired. Again, more info on the website. I'll just leave it alone for this demonstration. Finally, we have a deep calculations option. Depending on how many games remain in the season, if there are many remaining games and it is impossible to go through every one of the billions or trillions of scenarios, this adjusts how intense the analysis will be, and it also determines whether to spend additional time looking for paths to clinch. Generally speaking, early on in the season, there is no need for this, as the rough odds and info given from quicker processing will suffice. And for, say, fantasy football, maybe around week 8 or 9, this could be turned on as the playoff race heats up. It is required, no matter how many weeks are left in the season, to have this on for path to clinch listings to be calculated. One last section before we get to the calculations. We have a set tiebreakers manually section. This is for either leagues imported through the Google Sheets template in which tiebreaker data wasn't automatically collected, or for those leagues in which maybe don't use the default league hosting site rules to apply tiebreakers. I won't go into too much detail here. Instructions are on the website. Most users shouldn't have to touch this, but I'll show the tiebreakers the app currently can incorporate into the calculations. And those are points, a bunch of head-to-head options, division record, conference record. Points against and all play will be added soon. And for the sites that utilize a best in division approach to awarding wildcard spots, like My Fantasy, that is supported as well. Full deets on the website. Side note before we get to the calculations, for premium users, there is an option at the bottom to turn off the premium level, which some may find useful at the beginning of the season to just get super quick approximate odds and numbers. But finally, we can get around to hitting the Analyze button and some valuable info. The time it takes to do calculations can range from instantaneously to an agonizing long time. It is all going to depend on several factors: league size, league complexity, like how many divisions, what the tiebreakers are, how many remaining games there are, and just the uniqueness of the standings and playoff race at that exact moment in time. And there is no way to estimate how much time it is going to take ahead of time. You are forewarned. Here, for this example, with just 1 week worth of games remaining in a 12-team league, it will be instantaneous. Voila. Now going back to the team info section, we can see the division status and playoff status fields are populated, with intel on each team displayed. Those that have already clinched a spot are showing so, and the same for those that are already eliminated. For those still fighting, we have odds for either winning the division, in this case, or making the playoffs. You'll notice the letters C and T with the percentages. The T will mean the percentage chances of a team being in a tiebreak situation that at the present moment cannot be worked out. This will almost always be when two or more teams are fighting with each other, and it will come down to the points tiebreaker, which, depending on what was used in the points buffer mentioned earlier, we just don't know who will win that yet, as those teams are still close to each other in points. Another one of those full info on the website discussions. After that, we have what is the minimum number of wins needed for any chance column. This tells how many wins each team would need to get to have any mathematical chance at a playoff spot. Teams that have already clinched the spot or are already at this minimum will have a check mark next to them. Following that, we have a targets column. This is a computer calculated projection range of how many wins each team should aim for, with the low number being one that gives decent odds of making the playoffs, and the higher number being a fairly safe mark. In this example of just 1 week left and most spots claimed, there isn't any difference in the range. Then we have a guaranteed in number. This is the amount of wins that if the team were to hit, they would be guaranteed a playoff spot no matter what else were to happen. Teams that have already clinched a spot will have a check mark. Teams that have a number here also would have a designation of controlling their own destiny, something in the Android version that is spelled out with a separate column. Teams without a number or check mark here are either already eliminated or do not control their own destiny. Moving down, you'll see a create a PDF report section. Again, almost all the features being discussed, including this one, require the premium subscription. I'll revisit this in a second. Below, we now have a paths to clinch section, which will give us a brief glimpse of those. If there are numerous paths for any one team, the complete list will be in the PDF report. With this test demonstration being fairly simple, this happens to show them all. We can see that the Alphas, Bravos, and Foxtrots are fighting over Division 1 and what needs to happen for each of them to win it, as well as what the Charlies and Limas need to do to make the playoffs. Again, this is a very, very simple demonstration. Back up to the PDF report. This opens up the standard Apple print save pop-up. I'll just use markup so we can take a quick look at it. All the same info that I've gone through, some footnote descriptions, the complete paths to clinch list, and ready to be saved or shared with your league mates. I think that sums up this walkthrough. As mentioned on the website, with the number of hosting sites the app accommodates, some of those having a large number of league setup options, it is almost for certain that among the unlimited possibilities, something goes awry, as well as the Apple version being brand new. I both ask for your patience and your help in reporting something that makes it go kablooey. And if you use a hosting site that is not accommodated, let me know, as long as it's not CBS, as they don't play nice with the rest of the fantasy world. And I'll see what I can do to add it. There's some of the smaller hosting sites that I had added on the old web version, but hadn't added to the mobile apps as I wasn't sure there was enough interest to justify. And of course, any other suggestions are welcome. Guess that's it. Enjoy your day.